everyone. I really wanted to make this video about rest times in daycare because it's very close to my heart. It's a topic that has created a lot of conflict during my time as an early childhood educator, and it also taught me healthy strategies for dealing with this stressful period during the routine in the day working in childcare. I first wanted to share my very first experience with rest times in childcare. I was starting my studies and I had to do my placement, and I found a centre nearby that agreed to take me on a couple of days a week. And the first day I had a very awful experience with rest times. It was the first time I'd ever seen how this played out in a childcare centre. I do remember when my eldest child was 2 years old, many years ago, I trialled a day at a daycare centre, and when I picked him up, he was very shaken up and crying, and he kept saying he didn't want to sleep, and that the educator there admittedly said that she had tried to make him sleep and he wouldn't. And during this time he wasn't always sleeping in the day, so I didn't have strict beliefs about him having to do that, especially away from our home. I as a mother, I did understand that my children weren't always going to act the same way in other places than they do in the comfort of their own home. So that experience actually made me never take any of my children to daycare ever again. So that was the only experience that I had with my own children and childcare. And later in life, when I did to go do this placement, I got to see exactly what happens during this time of the day. So I noticed that the beds were all put out at a certain time. It was explained to me that during these particular times of the day, children are required to rest, and which made sense to me. However, there was this one child that kept saying, "Don't pat me, don't pat me, don't pat me." And they were very restless in the bed, and this educator said, I won't pat you, it's okay. And within a minute or two proceeded to pat this child on the back against their will. And this child kept saying, don't, I don't want to sleep. And this educator continued to pat the child. After some time that this child wasn't asleep, this educator became very angry and yelled at the child to go to sleep, and became very stressed and was yelling at all of the children to go to sleep. Another child was put in a separate area because they didn't sleep, and it was said to me that I couldn't talk to this child or pay this child any attention because they would learn otherwise that they are allowed to play up during rest time and move around and speak, and I was not to give that message. And this went completely against my own internal guidance, which was to speak to the child when they addressed me and to try to help them feel comfortable on their bed. I was asked to go on my 10-minute break, and I just broke down to myself, and I cried and I cried, and I was very shaken up by what I had seen in this room. I proceeded to share my feelings with the director, and I found that my hours of placement disappeared after that, and I can't know why, but I felt wrong for speaking up in a way about what to me felt like unkind treatment towards the children. Now, I did go on to get paid employment at another centre, which is where I did the rest of my placement. In that time, I actually saw very similar things during rest time. I worked for a while with the 2.5-year-old age group, and the same thing would happen. These children, whether they were tired or not, were forced to go to sleep. They were patted until they fell asleep, and the stress just kept rising and rising in these educators the longer it became that these children weren't going to sleep. And I myself experienced this stress because I, as a new educator, I believed it was my job to make these children sleep. And I got to feel that stress and what it was like, and it caused me to actually become similar to what I had witnessed myself. So rather than stand back and see this for myself, I actually became that and experienced it because of the pressures put on me as an educator from the system itself. So I admit there were times that I became cranky at the children for not sleeping. And on these occasions, I would go home in tears, and I would feel very awful, and I would say to myself, there has to be another way. This can't be the only way. I can't do this. I can't do this. I actually started to see a link between behaviors in some of the children related to being forced to sleep when they weren't tired. I was often told by people that had been in the childcare industry for 30 or more years that they claimed to know about this in great detail, and they would say to me, they all are tired and they all do need sleep. And this was proven to me because these children would eventually fall asleep. And I would think to myself, well, if they have no choice, eventually, if they're laying there for long enough and they're patted and patted and they know there's no way out of it, yes, they are going to probably fall asleep. Is that really what they would do if left to their own natural devices? Not necessarily. So I actually got to test this out. I was invited to become the lead educator of the pre-kindy room, which was the 3 to 3.5-year-olds. And these children were actually the children that had moved up from the previous room that I was in. So I already knew these children. I already knew their sleeping patterns and their behaviors. I knew which children really needed the sleep and which children didn't. So you might wonder, well, how can I know when children are grown out of the daytime naps? Through my experience as a mother and watching my own children grow and watching these children in a childcare setting, I do feel that roughly between it's possible that between the ages of 2.5 to 4 years is when these sleeping patterns are likely to change. Now, I did notice there were a lot of parents and educators that were very resistant to this change. They didn't want their child to change. They wanted that child to sleep. And they weren't embracing this natural ending of this developmental milestone to where the child grew out of the daytime nap. And it's important that we keep an open mind as parents and educators and be willing to move up with these children, move forward with these children as they change and as they're ready for their next steps. It's not helpful to resist it and try to keep that child down to where we think they need to be. So how children will communicate not needing a daytime nap is they will be over a period of time. If we watch this happening not just a couple of days in a row but weeks in a row, if we see them falling asleep a lot later than what they normally would, or falling asleep later and only sleeping for short periods like 30 minutes to an hour as opposed to 2 to 2.5 hours, this indicates them not needing that sleep or not needing much sleep. Also, children may have a different sleeping rhythm to what parents and educators believe. They may get tired closer to 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon as opposed to 11, 12 o'clock in the day. Their bodies may be telling them something different. I'm not tired. And if we try to tell them when they're tired, this is going to confuse them and it's going to interfere with their natural body clock and sleeping routines. So another sign that I would see of children not wanting or needing to sleep in childcare would be that they would become quite anxious and stressed around this time of day. So some of the children that I had cared for and tried to force to sleep in the previous room actually started to have anxiety at any thought or any mention of rest time. They would start to show unwanted behaviors. They would start to have a sense of panic. I don't want a bed, I don't want a bed, I don't want to lay down. Because they had associated rest time, as likely the child or children did in the first centre that I had worked at, with negativity, with a negative experience. Now, I knew that what I wanted to create in that new room as a lead educator was a peaceful, relaxed rest time routine. To do this, I had to look at those children with those unwanted behaviours, and I had to completely remove the notion of sleep. So I stopped putting beds out for these particular children. I told them, I'm not going to make you sleep, but I would like you to sit down and do a quiet activity. Over a period of even days, the result, the change in behavior in these children was quite astounding to me. They became a lot more calm during the day. Their overall behaviors lessened, and they no longer were as defiant or resistant to that rest time. I did this for a period of weeks until eventually all the children in my room, all 22 of them, would start asking for a bed. They wanted to lay down. They saw it as a positive experience because I had brought in rest time toys that they could play with on their beds. I put the TV on and put an educational program or some stories on for them to watch. And often the children that still really needed to sleep would fall asleep, as my own children did. I never had a problem with my own children ever falling asleep with the TV on. It actually really helped them to go to sleep, because when there is a pressure and emphasis on needing to sleep, whether it's us as adults or children, it can create all sorts of problems, insomnia, anxiety and stress around sleep. It can send unhealthy messages to children. And what we want is children to fall asleep feeling safe and happy and relaxed. So by the time I had left my job in public childcare, I had shown respect to all those children. I had, rather than have an overall approach to rest time for the whole room and whole children, I worked individually with each child. I communicated to parents. I found out what their routine was at home. What shocked me was that a lot of these parents had said to me they had no idea that their children were being made to sleep at daycare because they had actually grown out of their daytime naps for quite some time now. So it was no wonder that these children weren't wanting to sleep, because a lot of the educators didn't think to ask the parents what they wanted or what that was best for their child. They were just falling under the general assumptions that a lot of educators are under, which is that during rest time all children need to sleep. Now, I did end up having most of the children awake towards the end of the year, but that is quite normal. Most of them were approaching 3.5 to 4 years, and they really just were not needing that daytime nap. And for those parents that resisted the changes in their child and really wanted them to keep sleeping, I honored that, but I also was upfront and honest, and I said that I could never force a child to sleep. And eventually these parents came to embrace and accept the changes in their child and could see that this actually eliminated some of the stress and unwanted behaviors that these children exhibited. So I think that working individually with the children's sleep needs is what is going to be most helpful in a child care setting. I will link in the comments a blog post from my website about why my children don't need a bedtime, and it will give a more of a general idea of my own experiences with trying to force children to sleep, having gone through it myself with my own children. So I will link that in the comments and hope that that can be of some help. Please comment if you would like to, if you have anything to share on this topic or would like to provide your own experiences or feedback. I would really appreciate that. So I hope this video has been helpful, and I look forward to sharing more. Bye.